when you're choosing a ship to go to Antarctica, you actually want a smaller passenger ship. The larger ships are not actually able to dock, and you're not able to get off the boat. But because I went on one of the smaller passenger ships, we were able to get off the boat multiple times a day.
Okay, so we've set sail. And this is so gorgeous.
How was it?
Okay, it was amazing. I would say some of the things that I was most taken aback by was the size of everything, just the vastness of everything. When you're able to go to a new continent and there's no trees, no flowers, no buildings, you can really just appreciate the scale. And because of the nature of the continent, its ruggedness, everything just shoots right out of the water. So a mountain, like maybe on some of the other continents, would kind of take some time to gradually become really tall. But because of the ice, the mountains, huge mountains, just right out of the water. I know on our last call, we spoke about an effort towards conservatism. So we weren't able to bring the ship very close to land. So I was on a ship called the Ushuaia. And when you're choosing a ship to go to Antarctica, you actually want a smaller passenger ship. The larger ships are not actually able to dock, and you're not able to get off the boat. But because I went on one of the smaller passenger ships, we were able to get off the boat multiple times a day and actually go on to Antarctica. The way that we did this was we would use a Zodiac, so a small boat that would take over to the continent. That was really amazing, but before we were able to go to the continent, we had to do a huge check. So they gave us boots specifically to wear because we don't want to bring any foreign seeds or dirt from other continents over to Antarctica, because it would completely mess up the environment there, and the penguins, the seals, things like that. But once you're there, because a lot of these animals aren't used to seeing people, they're not afraid of you at all. So you'll just be walking and a penguin will just come and walk right in front of you. In Antarctica, the wildlife have right of way. So if you are walking and a penguin just starts walking in front of you, you stop and you can let that penguin go about its merry way. So it was really, really interesting. One day on the Zodiac, some humpback whales were just kind of curious, what is this in the water? And I think I sent you a video of this, but a pot of maybe 6 humpbacks just started swimming right up to our boat. I just, again, the size of them. And we could only see maybe 1/8 of their body, but it was amazing.
I could never imagine how big they are. Was the experience at all what you imagined it to be?
I think it was what I imagined. I would say it wasn't as cold as what I thought it was going to be.
I realized because you're wearing a crop top in one of these pictures.
Sometimes you just have to do it for the gram, you understand? But I would say it was maybe around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. most days. So it is cold and the weather can change immediately. So there's one day that we did a landing. So we got onto the continent and we were ready to start walking around. And then all of a sudden, the weather changed and we had to get right back on the boat, because sometimes if the weather changes and you are still on the continent, you might be supposed. So we had to be really mindful of that. Ice caps at the South Pole, we did see a lot of that. So because it's warmer, the icebergs are melting. So even before we got to Antarctica, we saw huge ice shelves, like that would take the span of like a block, like a street, like an entire street worth of ice would just be floating in the water even before we got to Antarctica. And that's a result of lowering temperatures at the South Pole. And because the temperatures are lower, there's less accumulation of snow every year as well. So
does that give you any greater appreciation for climate change initiatives?
I think it really does. I'm now more mindful of the effect that we here on other continents have on the rest of the world. And that's something too. So every day you'd have several lectures throughout the day. And that's one of the things that, we spoke about, climate change. We also spoke about how the currents of water are all related. So in Antarctica, something else I didn't expect is the waves don't go necessarily in one direction. They're kind of going in different directions because they're different waterways, what's coming to mind, but there's different kind of path currents that flow through Antarctica and different convergence of bodies of water. So really it's a meeting point of water from all different parts of the world. So when we're seeing, our oceans being flooded with garbage here in maybe North America and the Caribbean, that is kind of, affecting what's happening in Antarctica as well.
Being at such a central point, do you feel connected or disconnected?
It's so arid and so remote, I still do feel pretty disconnected. So when you leave and where you return from is a place called Ushuaia. That's Ushuaia, Ushuaia, Argentina. And that is a part of Patagonia. And when I came back, I was overwhelmed with how bright and golden the sunshine was, how really green the trees were. Because when you're on a ship for 10 days and you're only seeing shades of white and blue, and I won't even say black because maybe the penguins, but because it was summer at the South Pole, the sun never set. So we never saw nighttime. It was just daytime 24/7. And all you saw was just kind of white. The sky is just kind of white and cloudy there and just blues. So you'd either see blue sky or white kind of cloudy days, white as far as the eye can see. The penguins are black and white. The whales are black. You're only seeing basically 3 shades at most. So when I came back to the other continent, South America, and was seeing green and sunshine, it was really kind of overwhelming, and my brain was just really flooded with joy again. I think the dopamine was coming back. The trip has changed me in being a bit more mindful. I think when we last spoke, I was more in the mindset of conservatism and being mindful about the products that I use, how am I disposing of waste. But I think now I perhaps want to join organizations that I can understand more about the impact that we're having. There are very few carbon neutral countries in the world. I know I live in a country that's very carbon positive, meaning we emit more carbon waste than, than is used up. So what organizations are out there that are able to help not eliminate, but reduce carbon waste? And my friend who went with me, she's Latina, so she's kind of brown skin. But because of the hole in the ozone layer, she, for the first time in her life, got a sunburn in a place that's winter,
Wow.
So Yeah, so I think it was kind of really interesting, because these are all things that I've read about, but to see in person. So, you've heard about there's a hole in the ozone layer, but in 20-degree weather, having to put on sunblock, you are now kind of living the things that you've probably learned about in school.
I know you were worried about living on a ship for 10 days with strangers. How was that for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so good and bad. Good and bad. The ship was amazing. We had 3 courses every single day. They took really good care to make sure that the seasickness wasn't so bad. But I will admit, I think last time we spoke about crossing the Drake, there were times that the Drake was so rough that you could feel the propellers and the aft of the ship or the stern being lifted out of the water. So the waves would be so rough that at times parts of the ship were out of the water. And then you would feel the ship kind of like elevator drop and slam back down into the water. And if the propellers were out, you would then feel the ship like vibrate strongly because, the propeller is supposed to be in deep water. But when it was out of water, you would feel like a tu-tu-tu-tu-tu, and then it would slam back down. You have to be very careful moving around the ship. You have to be careful going to the bathroom. For 2 days, it was advised that you not shower. In the shower, you didn't want to be kind of slippery when the ship was rocking around. So we took little sink baths pretty much for those 2 days. On the ship, there are fire doors because if there is a fire on one part of the ship, you want to keep that contained because if the entire ship is on fire, you're in deep water. I wasn't nervous, but I could feel subconsciously that my body was uncomfortable. It's hyperthermia. So let's say that, if there is an emergency, and we did a safety briefing, we did safety drills on how to get into the pods. If there was an emergency, there were these little orange kind of submarine things on the side of the boat that everyone would get into. But we also had life jackets. And that's if the pods fail. So if there was a problem on the ship failed. And then the pods failed. Then you put on your life jacket and you get into the water. But we've all seen Titanic and you know that you're not lasting. You're not lasting very long there. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't even say the word Titanic on the ship. If somebody wanted to reference it, one of the lecturers, they would mention, they made so we were talking about the different kinds of ships and ice. And the reason why, if we were on the continent and suddenly there was an ice storm, that they had to take us back to the ship immediately because before the ice got frozen, is our ship was not an icebreaker. So if our ship tried to break through an iceberg, then you wouldn't reference what would happen. You wouldn't say the name, but you say, I think they made a movie about what could happen. So the iceberg would pierce the hull of the ship and, we wouldn't be in a good place. So there's a little bit of superstition when you're in places that are surrounded by iceberg that you don't say famous ships that were taken down by icebergs. I also too questioned, just being Jamaican, being Black. I was one of only 3 Black people that were on a 700 person ship boat. And I did question some of the my subconscious and how uncomfortable I was on the days of crossing the Drake. Some people got seasick, but I didn't get seasick, but I did feel innately uncomfortable. And I did question, sometimes if you're from an island, sometimes our parents would say, don't go to the water, maybe because they saw fishermen maybe going out and not coming back. So I know growing up in St. Elizabeth, whenever we go to Treasure Beach or any of the beaches there, I was always cautioned not to go to the water. So even though we're from an island, it did kind of bring up in me a greater fear of deep water that some of my non-Black counterparts did. And I even thought perhaps about generational trauma. If I had any ancestors who the last time they went on a large ship like this, maybe being brought over from Africa, and maybe a traumatic experience that still perhaps resided in me. Because I would sometimes wake up when crossing the Drake, like in a fright. So your bed is against a wall, and it's fixed there. Your bed is not a bed in a room. It's fixed against a wall because everything in the room moves around when you're crossing the Drake. And we put our life jackets on one end. So your bed was now kind of making a V between the mattress and the wall. So you'd be kind of tucked in there. Otherwise, the Drake can be so rough that you would just be shaken around in bed if you didn't kind of tuck yourself in. Yeah. So kind of like a bit of a violent experience in water. And I just know that I think I, more than some of my non-Black counterparts, while I didn't get seasick, I was definitely having a very innate, uncomfortable experience on some violent days.
Okay. How long did it take to cross the Drake?
It took about 2 days. Yeah, so 2 nights of sailing.
Would you go back, and would you recommend this experience to anyone?
Yes, I definitely would. But I would recommend it to people who are also interested in it for perhaps conservationary reasons and not just for tourism reasons, perhaps. I think maybe, the cost of it, the difficulty in crossing the Drake. Would I necessarily go back? I think it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. But I do think if you're a person that is interested in the environment, is perhaps a big traveler and a traveler who travels ethically, I think it's definitely an experience that I would recommend. This time I went on a smaller boat because I wanted to be on the continent as much as possible, which happened. I was on the continent 2 times a day, but perhaps if I went back, maybe I would think about taking a larger ship that has stabilizers, because crossing the Drake on a boat that does not have stabilizers, we were rocking and rolling on that boat. So maybe, one of the larger ones that have like a stabilizer, maybe I'd be a little bit interested in. It's summer in South America. So all of our luggage was with summer clothes, and then we're going to like a very, very cold place. So kind of having one backpack just with winter gear and like snowsuits, gloves, snow goggles, hats, like very bulky items, and then one smaller bag with just like summer clothes. I do think that it was perhaps the hardest trip to pack for of any trip I've ever been on.